Controversy tonight concerning one of the top organizers behind the Women's March movement, which was supposed to represent a wide cross-section of women in this country. Linda Sarsour criticizes the Trump presidency while supporting Sharia law. Her views promoted by the official Women's March Twitter account, and she was one of the organizers. They say they will always have her back. But now some are questioning if she's the right messenger for women of this country. Sarsour has lashed out at other prominent women who are in favor of reforming some of the tenets of Islam. Sarsour's 2011 tweet, which has now resurfaced, went after these two very prominent women who have spoken out against Sharia law and in this vicious way. Read this for yourself at home. As she berates them and says that she wishes she could whip them and take away their body parts. It is vile, to say the least. Joining me now is the person who that was directed at, Ayaan Hirsi, well-known author and activist and research fellow at the Hoover Institution and the founder of the AHA Foundation. Ayaan, welcome. Very good to have you with us tonight.
Martha, thank you very much for having me.
What is your reaction when you look at, I know you've read the text of that and everybody at home just read it as well. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that Ms. Sarsour is hostile to me, not because she knows me, but because she's a fake feminist. Ms. Sarsour is not interested in universal human rights. She's a defender of Sharia law. And the principle of Sharia law, there's no principle that demeans, degrades, and dehumanizes women more than the principle of Sharia law. And Linda Sarsour is a defender of that. She hates me, she hates Brigitte Gabriel because of that. And I want to ask Linda Sarsour and the women who put their trust in her, why did she not organize a march for Asia Bibi? That's the woman in Pakistan who's on death row. She is condemned because allegedly she did something that caused her to blaspheme. Or Miriam Ibrahim in Sudan, who was imprisoned. The 270 plus women that were kidnapped in Boko Haram, the Yazidi women who were subjected to slavery by ISIS. This is the times we live in. And these fake feminists who say they speak for Muslim women, they have never said anything about this. Linda Sarsour is not a defender of universal human rights. She's a defender of Sharia law. She hates me because I expose what Sharia law is. What Sharia law is what the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria is doing.
I mean, you have been a victim of genital mutilation, which is something that you speak out about quite a bit. It must be shocking to you to watch all of these women gather, in Washington under this woman's, leadership. What is your message to those women?
Well, I have friends there who marched, and when they spoke to me, I would say to them, listen, guys, we have threats, real threats against women, a real war on women. Our genitals are being cut. 140 million women have been subjected to genital mutilation. Child brides. We have women in China, for instance, the technology of looking at what is in your womb. I have a baby, and I had, 20 weeks, I could tell whether that was a boy or a girl. That technology is being used to remove girls. We are not marching against this kind of thing. We're not marching against mass rape in Europe. This is the kind of thing we need to be marching against, and we're not marching against that. If we're really interested in civil rights, human rights, female, the rights of women, we should not go with fake feminists.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Could you please explain the unholy alliance between the left and the forces and the Muslim supremacists, considering that the premises and the principles of both of them are mutually incompatible?
Okay, so they're not mutually incompatible to point A, they are to point B. What I mean is that it's a timeline. The left wants to tear down Western civilization because it thinks it's unequal. The radical Muslims want to tear down Western civilization because they think it's evil. So to the point of tearing down Western civilization, they're pretty much on the same page. It's where they go from there that's a problem. Right? One side wants to build a caliphate and the other side wants to build a communist utopia. The reason that the left is routinely, and it's almost invariable, that the left ends up siding with the world's worst human beings in every situation is because, again, if you just go back to that fundamental leftist principle that equality of outcome is all that matters in life, that equality of outcome means that something just is happening, think about it. The real world is a place where God designed it this way. I believe this. God designed it not for every individual, but certainly for the vast bulk of humanity. If you do responsible, good things with your life, you will be more successful than if you do irresponsible, bad things with your life. Well, if the left believes that people who are unsuccessful are more virtuous, then what that means is that the non-virtuous are more virtuous, right? Because the people who are unsuccessful are generally not doing good, responsible things, and the left says, well, those people are victims, let's help them. Right? So the Muslims in the Middle East are victims of Israel. They must be victims of Israel because Israel's rich and its neighbors are not. So they must be victims. Well, the real reason that the Muslims, the Palestinian Muslims, for example, are poor is because they've spent all the money that has been given to them, hundreds of billions of dollars, all the money that's been given to them over the course of decades, and they've spent it on terrorism, and they've spent it on stocking it away in their bank accounts of Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, and they've spent it on garbage, and they spent it on anti-Israel propaganda. That's the real reason they're poor. But the left looks at it and they say, they're poor. That means they're virtuous. This is why I hate it, really despise it, when Republicans do the whole, I'm a better person because I have a rags to riches story. You weren't a better person when you're poor. Okay, no one is a better person just because they're poor. By the way, no one's a better person because they're rich. All that wealth is a measure of how many voluntary exchanges you engaged in a free market. That's all that wealth is. But the idea for the left is that all inequality is evil. Therefore, the people who are unequal at the top are evil and the people at the bottom are virtuous. Which is why you'll hear people on the left say things like they like small business, but they hate people who are big business, like the Walmart family, right? The Walton family. They're terrible. Well, were they terrible when they were just a family living in the middle of nowhere? When exactly did they transition over into evil? Right? When they became successful enough, because their success meant, by necessity, according to the leftist worldview, they were depriving others of their fair share. And Bernie Sanders said this right after winning New Hampshire the other night. And this is Bernie Sanders' entire thing. He says the principle of America is the principle of fairness, which makes me want to vomit and never stop vomiting. The principle of America is not fairness of outcome. And he was talking about fairness of outcome. He said, oh, it's unfair that 1% of the population lives with more wealth than 90% of the rest of the population. And, well, maybe, or maybe it's not unfair, because it turns out that 1% of the population is hiring the other 90% of the population to actually provide their services and labor. Social services, that is not my primary concern. I have two primary concerns when it comes to the Syrian refugees. One is obviously the fact that we can't screen them. And despite the Obama administration's protestations that, yes, we have beautiful vetting procedures, right? The same vetting procedures that got you Major Nidal Hassan, the same vetting procedures that got you the Chattanooga, Tennessee shooter, the same vetting procedures that got you the Sarnia brothers, right? All of these vetting procedures, they say that they're going to do biometric scans, which are completely useless unless you actually have physical evidence of these people committing criminal acts elsewhere, right? You have nothing to scan them against. It's like saying they're going to fingerprint these folks. Well, unless you have fingerprints at a crime scene somewhere else, that doesn't make any difference. They say that they're going to interview them. What does that interview look like? I mean, really, what is that? They say apparently the people doing the interviews have 8 days of training on Syria, and then they're thrown right in. They say that they're going to do background checks. By calling whom? Who do you actually call? Do you call Bashar Assad and ask him for his information? Right? So it's nonsensical. People on Homeland Security Committee know this is nonsensical. Today, the House passed a bill curbing Syrian immigration after Homeland Security came and made a presentation. They actually lost votes after the Homeland Security presentation. So that's one issue. The other issue is, what is the nature of the immigrants that you're bringing in, period? And this is not a religious issue, it's a values issue. Are the people who you're bringing in going to make the country a better place, or are they going to make the country a more polarized place? Do they have any experience with Western-style democracy? Do they believe in any of the same American rights that we believe in, or not? And that's a very relevant question to ask about any immigrants and any class of immigrants. Now, do I think it's stupid to say you're not going to bring in 5-year-old orphans? Yes, I think that's dumb. But do I think that it's not stupid to say you ought to look at the values of the people that you're bringing in? I would say that about people of any religion. And the fact is that when you're talking about people who are coming from a place like Syria, which has no history of democracy, no history of human rights, no history of basic American rights like freedom of speech, no idea of what equality of the sexes looks like, there's going to be a culture clash. Look at Europe. Europe is full of culture clash because of the vast wave of Muslim immigration. So on those two levels, I'm extremely worried about the Syrian refugee wave. And by the way, question for the Ummah, right, the Muslim nation that is supposed to take everybody in. There are 1 billion Muslims on planet Earth, and there are 52 Islamic majority countries on planet Earth. None of you have room for these folks? None of you? Right? Turkey is taking in about 2 million of them. 15% are still in refugee camps. The truth is that the Ummah has a pretty poor record of taking in refugees. Right? For all the talk about how it's the Israelis who are victimizing the Palestinians, for example, there are still, 70 years later, 10 refugee camps in Jordan. There are 13 refugee camps full of Palestinians in Syria. There are refugee camps in the south of Lebanon for Palestinians 2 generations after the creation of Israel. By contrast, Israel has taken in every wave of Jewish refugees that has ever existed. So I'm getting tired of hearing the sort of unearned moral superiority of the Muslim world when it comes to, oh, you Westerners, you have to take our refugees.